You are listening to the Good Girl Podcast. I am Cameo King, your host, the Good Girl Podcast. There wasn't a space for women to be themselves in every facet of their lives. And so I created the Good Girl Podcast to have those uncomfortable conversations where we can really deal with ourselves and understand what it really means to be good. Something else we do here on the Good Girl Podcast, we deconstruct this idea of good femininity. I think of good femininity as the thing society tells you you should be, you need to be in order to be successful, especially as a woman. For example, the way you dress, the way you talk, how you carry yourself, as though all those things are the determining factor in your success in all domains. I'm talking about relationships, spiritual, career, community. But we know that ain't true. And so every week we have conversations that combat good femininity. We deconstruct good femininity, and hopefully are providing solutions. And so, and sometimes we just have some really good conversations that challenge your heart and hopefully free you a little bit, because it's all about freedom. It's all about being your full and your best self and just living in that absolutely liberty. So one of those conversations today I'm excited about having, and y'all know who I'm going to have it with. I'm going to bring her on in, my bestie, Danielle Moore. Hey, girl, hey.
What up, though? It's good to be back in the podcast building.
And look, we was hype. We was hype before this. We was like, big bang.
Finley band taker, this Balenciaga, Danny's back in all these listeners. Hey, we're happy.
Okay,
we're glad to be back. It's the Cammy and Danny show. Y'all love to see it.
It is. I know you see it. So excited to be back. And I think the conversation that we are going to have today will really change your perspective on how you see yourself as you are going through this journey with us of growth, of emotional growth, of becoming more self-aware. I think there is a picture that is being painted that doesn't include all aspects of it. And so what we're going to do, we're going to include some of those aspects. So today's show, we're going to talk about the uncomfortable truth about the healing journey. And obviously, Danny is on the show, and Danny brings a unique perspective. One, because she's a mental health therapist. She's also a psychiatric assessor. She has her own practice, the Refresh Wellness Center. She also has the Uncouched Therapy. And so she not only brings her experience as a mental health therapist, but, you know, she's just my good friend. And so we can have different conversations that I think I can with most folks. So, Danny, I hope you're excited about this one.
I'm very excited about this conversation, as I am about all of our conversations.
Let's just hop right into it, like the uncomfortable truth. What is, because we say, oh, you're gonna be whole. I even led with it. You're gonna be whole. You're gonna be free. You're gonna be walking through a field with flowers, picking daisies. You're gonna be in these great relationships. But the truth is,
laughable is what it is. The truth is, it can be quite lonely, and it's not going to be all roses and lilies. And, you know, just as human beings, we're creatures of habit. So when we have to change something, even when it's hurting us, right? Even if it's not serving us, it can be very turbulent and hard to do. It can put you in a place where you become isolated, because the more you do the work, the more you realize how you don't align with people, places, and things, and you have to separate yourself from those things. And that can be really, really hard. And oftentimes people will blame, shame, and attack you for growing, evolving, and no longer, you know, being able to, or having the capacity to be in or share those spaces with them. And so sometimes they will try to guilt and shame you into staying in relationship or staying in organizations or engaging in behavior that does not align with your core values or desired outcomes, or just who you are at your core as your authentic self.
In plain English, you will be by yourself. like I'm not saying you're going to be completely by yourself, but because of those things you mentioned, because you have people you were in a relationship with who were used to you not having boundaries, because you were in relationship with people who didn't necessarily align with your core values, because you are in relationships with folks who didn't necessarily respect you, because you're in relationships when you didn't know your self-worth. As you evolve and as you grow, those things fall off.
They do.
Those things shift, right? They may still be in your quote unquote circle, but they move. They move to the outer courts, right? They move to the
Definitely do.
outer circle of your friendships, um, and of your relationships. And so I want us to talk about what that alone looks like, right? And I don't want to say loneliness. It can't be lonely, but what that alone time looks like, because I think a lot of us have shifted to really doing a lot of self-awareness work, to doing a lot of internal work. And we find ourselves not wanting to be in the company of a lot of folks. And we may think, is there something wrong with me? Is life going to end up like this? How do I really love folks? All these questions that come along with your self-awareness journey.
So be clear. A lot of people do experience loneliness when you are going through the healing journey and you have to separate yourself from people. And I want to talk about how we got here, right? We get to the place where we end up having to do this, like falling away from people, places, and things because we've been socialized to be around these people, places, and things our entire lives. And so, a lot of times what we would call a midlife crisis is when you wake up, to yourself and you're just like, I don't like this life that I'm living. I don't like how I'm showing up in the world, and I'm searching for me. You know what I mean? I'm not seeing me. I'm not hearing me, and I'm in a bunch of places that require me to show up as pieces of myself. And so I am starving for places where I am able to just show up and be myself. And from the time that we are toddlers, we are taught to be people pleasers. And we are taught, be good for your parents and your caregivers, be good to the teachers, be a good friend and be social. You don't want to be by yourself. You don't want to be awkward, fit in, dumb down, do all of these things, so that you aren't blamed, shamed, or attacked. Right. So we do all of this people pleasing and all of this fitting into people's idea of how we're supposed to show up in spaces with them so that people don't harm us. Right. And so the older we get and the more autonomy we have, the more we start to figure out, well, what do I like and what do I want? And the more you live, you crave being in spaces where you are able to be yourself and do the things that you want and just be and exist how you are in your natural state. But for many of us, we've been socialized to participate in activities and be a part of relationships that do not celebrate us as our authentic selves, especially as a woman. And so, there's toxic stuff on both sides of the fence, male and female, right? Men have their fair share of stuff where they have been socialized to be a certain way, where they're not even allowed to show each other affection or emotion without being called gay or homosexual. And it's really ridiculous because, we are all human beings. We all are interconnected, and God created us to be interdependent, and we all have emotions, and we all need love and attention, and we need affection from other people. So this idea that you can't show affection, you can't have feelings, like you're literally oppressing people for showing love to each other. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And so when you get to the place where you run out of F's to give, as they say, you're just like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm going to be me. I'm going to show up and be myself. And if they don't receive me, There's a scripture in the Bible that says, if you go to someone's house and they don't receive you, knock the dust off your feet and chuck the deuces. You know, it's that scripture. I'm knocking the dust off my feet and I'm chucking the deuces to anything, people, places, organizations, wherever, job, church, whoever, anybody on the chopping block. When it comes to me and my well-being, I need to be able to show up in this life and fulfill the purpose that God put me on this earth to do. I can't do that if I'm constantly suffocating or allowing myself to be suffocated in relationships and in institutions that oppress me. I continue to show up and allow myself to get beat down and allow myself to be subjected to all of this. And so, you know, when it's your family or when it's longtime friends, you know, when it's religious institutions, when it's your job, organization that is an institute that requires or has expectations of you to show up in a specific way that doesn't serve you, you can find yourself healing and stepping away from those things. And then you look around and you're by yourself. And it's like, okay, I want to be able to socialize or do certain things, but I don't want to go socialize with that person because I don't like the way that I feel when I'm with them. I want to be able to go to this event, but if I go to that event, then there are going to be things that happen at that event or things that are said to me or about me that are abrasive or emotionally abusive or oppressive. And so I don't want to show up in that space either. It's not safe for me to go there. Your nervous system needs safety, or you're going to be in a state of fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, you know? And so if you don't feel safe with certain people, you fall back. If you don't feel safe in certain organizations, you fall back. And then you find yourself by yourself. And it's like, well, what am I doing? That can bring about some confusion. And so when that happens, that place for a lot of people, they've never been by themselves. They've never spent any time by themselves. They don't sit with their emotions. They don't know what they want for themselves. And it's not filtered through how they have to show up as a sister, a mother, a wife, a father, a husband, a brother, a uncle. It's not, you know, for a lot of people, they aren't allowed to just sit with their feelings and be themselves and think about what they want without thinking about how it impacts or affects others. And so you end up in distress. And sometimes it's this tug of war between returning to relationships that don't serve you, returning to just because it's familiar, or just because you don't know how to dissolve the relationships or have good boundaries with them.
And if we're honest, when you talk about the idea of returning to old relationships or organizations that don't necessarily serve you, it's not going to be the same. You know, you're simply not going to fit. I think it was Tabitha Brown that was talking about, and this was a long time ago in one of her lives or one of her videos, how we often try to save things or try to hold on to things, articles of clothing, you know, that maybe we wore or that we hope to get into, but because our body has changed, whether we have gained weight, lost weight, built muscle, whatever, had a baby, is like we are pregnant, those clothes will not fit the same. And relationships and organizations are the same way. And so what happens is we get into this tug of war when we get back into that space, and it is tension is tension within ourselves. And honestly, it's only probably the individual that's experiencing that, because the organization is going to be what the organization is going to be, right? The person is going to be who the person is going to be until they decide to change. But I think we need to be highly aware of that when we are considering and we are in this unfamiliar place of being alone, when we are considering going back to something that was good for us for a season, right? Or that taught us some things for a season, because I think that's also a part of the story. A lot of these people, these relationships and these institutions, they were good for us. So you brought up the church. The church was good for me. It held me down. It still holds me down to this day. The people that I love, the relationships that I built, I know I could call them and say, "Hey, I'm going through this thing." They will probably give their right arm to me. But when we think about, and that's interpersonal relationships, not the actual institution that has laws, that has culture, that has norms and values that can be oppressive to women. When we think about going back to those things, we are the people that are going to be harmed. And we are the people where our nervous system is going to go into overload because this is not the space that we are supposed to be in. And so while we are existing in our alone time, I also think we tend to grab at whatever, right? We may not grab at that old thing, but we also begin to grab at new things. And I think a part of this conversation is resting in your alone time. It's going to be challenging, but I think resting in your alone time, because a part of that self-awareness is getting to know you, the you that was always there, but the you that you are allowing to come to the surface, the you that you are beginning to share with family and friends, the you that you are beginning to share with the community, that you also have to get comfortable with and ask yourself, am I really okay with this? Or is somebody else telling me to do this? Is society telling me to do this? Is this a part of the trends that I'm seeing on social media? Or is this really me? And does this really afford me these opportunities of freedom, of healing, of self-actualization? And so I think there is an entire gambit of processes and of layers that is uncomfortable as you are on this journey of healing, of growth, and of becoming more aware of yourself, of self-awareness.
I absolutely agree. I also know that just as important as it is to unlearn and to dissolve or change the nature of certain relationships and to fall away, it's just as important to relearn. And so during that alone time, it's like, okay, I figured out what doesn't work for me. Now I have to learn what works for me and how to obtain that, right? And so how do I build healthy relationships with people if, I have had these decades of toxicity and dysfunction in my relationships, normalized toxicity and dysfunction, right? How do I engage with family members who, are 10 toes down and digging their heels in the dirt, with the family dysfunction? And I seem to be the person that's bringing turbulence because now I'm functioning outside of the system. I no longer am in alignment with the dysfunction in this family or institution. And so now I'm stepping away. How do I relearn, or what do I need to do to not filter everything through my trauma or my hurt and have trauma bonds with people? Because, oftentimes people just bond with somebody else over the fact that they have disconnected in this other space, and there's still a component of healing that needs to happen there so that you can have healthy relationships with people moving forward, or so that you are a part of institutions that are not oppressive to you, right? I agree with you. The church has been helpful in a lot of ways, but historically speaking, the church has been largely oppressive to women. And so to decide that you want to step away from the church and step away from organizations that are harmful to you, but you still want to be able to get to word and you still want to participate in certain stuff, it can be very hard, especially when an institution like that is not about to change in the ways that are needed in order for you to participate. As I'll just speak for me, in order for me to participate in ministry as a single woman who doesn't have children, who is, physically attractive and has historically been demonized or mishandled or exploited in that space.
Mm-hmm. Listen, you stepping on the toes of the other show that's coming. Listen, look at your face. Y'all need to be watching this instead of just listening. You should see
Yeah, I
your
do.
face
You
in the
know
shoulder
what? But
shimmy, in the shoulder shimmy.
we gonna have it set
This-
up in the future where you can see all of these shows.
Eh,
Before
okay, so and so we're talking about again this journey to self-awareness and the uncomfortable truth that you will be lonely. I want to talk about some things that hinder us from becoming self-aware, hinder us from growth. And we are already somewhat there, but we think about the church. And I want to play this clip. It pissed me off. And I'm going to play it first, and we'll talk about how this is specifically connected to this topic. Here we go.
People ask me, how did you stay away from sexual stuff? I was too tired. I was getting my money and getting my ministry. And I look back, I value that season of my life. Okay, I like being married, but I think back, that was a time to kill it. Some of you are not killing it enough. You're not supporting your pastor enough. You should be living at the church, making your money, going to the church, making your money, going to the church. Kill it for the kingdom. Why? Because seasons change. In this season, this is your season to take advantage of that. I'm needy. I didn't realize, or I'm realizing more. I'm needy. Yeah, I pull on that girl, and some of you brothers can feel this. And know this before you get married. I'm needy. Oh, yeah, I would love to have a husband like that. Girl, you don't want me. Listen, I need what I need. Not just sex. I'm needy. I need a lot from my wife.
So that was Pastor Vernon. He has a pretty large following. And I think he definitely has a focus on relationships in a lot of his communication. And as we are talking about self-awareness, and because my audience, we have a pretty large percentage of Black women that are listening. And I think living in the United States, it's hard for you to avoid the culture of Christianity. And so whether you are a believer or not, whether you are a Black woman or not, I believe some of this expectation, some of this direction that he provided has influenced you on some level. And I say this too because Black women still hold the top spot for being the group who is most faith-filled, right? Who assigns themselves to some type of faith. So everything that was wrong with that video. I'm pausing because there was a lot wrong with that video. And I think we've all been there. I've been there when I have been very involved in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at my church, believing I was doing the work of the Lord. I'm not saying that it wasn't bad and I wasn't called to certain places, but we need to provide balance. And so, Danny, I'm gonna let you go because I see your face. I feel like your eyes are low like this. I know you ain't gonna say, but this.
So,
but anyway,
I heard another pastor, Tim Ross, say the church has been the worst steward of the gifts of the people of God. And a lot of people have spent their life doing the works of the church and not doing the work of the Lord. And a lot of people have been exploited in that space. And a lot of people also use the church to distract you from actually fulfilling your purpose, right? And so the idea that the only thing that you should be doing as a single person is going to work and going to church is not of God. God did not put you here to only go to work in church. And I know that that's going to be hard for some people to swallow. God gave you a purpose and destiny. And I guarantee you, for the majority of the people, it is outside of the walls of the church. And for a lot of people, your participation in church activities and events is keeping you from actually fulfilling your purpose and destiny. I will never forget. I was incensed. I was so upset that there was this mandatory meeting where I was required to be on Zoom with my camera on. There was all of these emails and reminders, basically of rebuke, like, you better be present for the entire time. Your camera needs to be on. And if you got to work, then maybe this just ain't your season to serve. And it was just very condescending I stepped away from a patient area because this was a day that I was on call at the hospital. I stepped away from the patient area, went into my office, turned on the Zoom to listen to the ministers and elders laugh, cackle, and share zero substance. There were some introductions about this team, this team, this team. There was nothing that was shared that could not have been shared in an email. And I am a mental health professional. I was at the hospital doing psychiatric assessments, determining the next level of care for people who are in mental distress. But because of my credentials, I was required to be in this meeting. And there was all, like I said, of this rebuke. I was livid. And that was the day that I was just like I was already pretty much gone before then. But when that happened, I was done. I am not about to continue to give my time, talent, and resources to places that do not respect my time or my purpose. And that's exactly what I'm supposed to be here for. I'm supposed to be here to get discipleship and to disciple. I'm supposed to be here to facilitate the work. No. No. I am on this earth to do what God called me to do. Being in this meeting right now with this foolishness going on does not align with my purpose and destiny. It does not. It was really a meeting about being a part of the cool kids club. I'm not about to get to heaven. That scripture talking about there are going to be people who get to heaven and say, we did this in your name and we did that in your name and we did this in your name. And God is going to be like, depart from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you. That's going to be for church folks. And y'all, there are going to be people that are going to be mad that I am saying this, but these are the facts. A lot of us have been distracted by the works of the church, and we are not doing the work that the Lord told us to do. I'm out here doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I can't be responsible for other people. I have a responsibility for what God has allowed me to experience, for me to come into. I have a responsibility to steward my own purpose. And so when you find things that are in conflict with that and you got to step back, that's what you have to do. Is it hard? And has that been hard for me? Absolutely. It has been, because I've been conditioned to believe that I got to be at the church. You just heard what R.A. Vernon said. You need to be out here killing it. You need to go to work and you need to go to church and you need to be supporting your pastor and you need to be doing this, that, and the other. No, I need to be supporting the Lord. I need to be doing what the Lord.
And it's funny, he didn't talk about God or purpose not once in that short little clip. And I think what was interesting is he almost contradicted himself. He did contradict himself, because he went on to say in his relationship with his wife, he didn't realize how needy he was. This conversation is about self-awareness. And what happens is, and this is something you mentioned, when we are so busy doing things, especially Black women, when we are so busy doing the work of the church, we do not have time to become self-aware of the things that we need, the things that we desire, and even some of our trauma. And when we believe that that approach is right, that it's work, church, and that is the right thing to do when we do get in relationships, right? Or when we do try to function in our purpose, we are somewhat behind, right? Because we don't even know who we are, because all we know is church. And church, if it's not all. I think East Coast got it pretty good. Some West Coast church, but some of these churches are so far behind in schools of thought and where people are. There is a huge disconnect. It's almost like sometimes some institutions are on another planet that they are not aware of the lives that people live every day. And
they don't
even
care about the lives that you live every day. Again, that's a hard pill to swallow. They don't care about the life that you're living. The only thing that they care about is, are you going to be present to facilitate, to give your free labor and your money to this institution to facilitate our purpose and vision. We aren't committed to really helping you fulfill your purpose and destiny. We are committed to making sure that your gifts and talents remain in this organization to support whatever it is our organization has decided we want to fulfill. And however we're going to do that, however we're going to do that, we're going to get you in an emotionally charged atmosphere. We're going to hold a bunch of events and a bunch of fundraisers. And this may or may not be aligned with your purpose and destiny, but nobody is checking in to see if it does.
I think that is the case for, I don't want to say most, I haven't done any type of survey or anything like that, but that has been the experience, I think, of enough folks, because I have attended some churches and there has been an intentionality with the pastor saying, my job is not to hold you. My job is to cultivate you, equip you, and send you out. I don't want you to stay here. I don't want you to stay here. I want you to go. I will never hold you. And that has been very intentional in some churches. In other churches, not so much so. And the reason why this conversation is important is because for a lot of women, in their mind, they believe that they are doing right and that they are preparing themselves for whatever God has for them. Yes, I believe God's grace is sufficient. Yes, his mercy will be there too. But when you come into a space of awareness that you are doing the works of the church and you are not aligned with your purpose. And let me be clear. There is some type of push in your heart, some type of tug on your spirit where you aren't necessarily getting what you desire to get or to give in these spaces. And that should be your first pause or your opportunity to go to God and say, what am I doing? I've shared this story before. I was sitting in church and I got into a place, this is before COVID. And I got into a place where it seems like I wasn't satisfied. Nothing that I did, whether it was serving, whether it was preaching, whether it was on a prayer team, nothing that I did. It was a space of discontentment, right? An unsettling, an uneasiness, and also a place of boredom. And I was like, God, what am I doing here? Like, I'm literally sitting in church asking God, what am I doing here? And I get up and one of my mentors, I'm about to walk out, and she says, she's like, Cameo, I really wasn't paying attention. So she had to call my name a couple times. And she was like, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing good. And she was like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm doing good. And she was like, well, the look on your face in church says something different. And I was like, oh. And before I could say anything, and she said to me, no, I'm not supposed to be here either. And I was like my mouth wide open. Because she said, your face looks like, why am I here? Why am I here? And so I think we all have those experiences, very much so, that tell us that it is time for a shift, that it is time for a move. Another case in point, I even had someone come up to me, this was years ago. I do work with girls. My nonprofit, Great Glam and Guts, I've been doing it now for almost 12 years. I've served thousands of girls through after school programming, through state conferences, through a multitude of things, through summer camps at Michigan State University. And it started off as a job because I was working for a nonprofit, and it evolved into my own nonprofit. And it got pretty big in the city that I'm in. And I had an elder of the church come up to me. And he confessed. He said, Cameo, I'm going to be honest with you. I was angry at you because you took your work outside the church. And I was like, huh? He was like, yes, I was angry. I was upset with you because our girls needed. And I said, do you know they can come too, even though it's outside of the church? Did you know they can come too, even though it's outside of the church? And then he said, I do, but now I know why you took it outside the church, because the church doesn't support you like the world does. And because you won't be able to do what you want to do and what you need to do because of the constraints of the church. And I was definitely like dumbfounded, Danny. I was dumbfounded. Like I've had success in this space, but there was this anger because it didn't stay within the church.
Because what the church can't control, they demonize. What and who the church can't control, they demonize. Especially women. So, there's so much to unpack there that is the legacy of slavery continuing to manifest in our lives, where, people are continuing to be oppressed and it is being presented as holiness and righteousness, the righteousness of God. Mm-hmm. And it just isn't. It is a perversion of the scriptures. Jesus didn't die for us to go to a building 2 or more times a week, socialize with the same people, participate in some community events here and there. But the thing that we do primarily is socialize with the same people inside this institution. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that primarily happens. That is the majority of the time spent there, is socializing with the people who are a part of that organization.
And withholding resources for the people that are inside that institution, and not putting ourselves in a position where we are a light on a hill, where we are the hands and the feet, where we are meeting people where they are. It's no, this is for the saved and the sanctified. These blessings are only for it. It excuses grace in people's lives. And I think, and I may have skipped over this, but I just want to be clear, when we are using this clip and we have this example, that R.A. Vernon even admitted that he didn't know himself. He didn't realize his needs. And we talk about the importance of self-awareness, but yet still you're preaching the contrary.
The way that, church is set up and even what he said, you don't start to really lean into self-awareness, what your likes or dislikes are, or who you are. It doesn't really start to come out in those settings until you're married and cohabitating with somebody. And then you start to, who you are starts to come out in this space, you know what I mean? Versus who you've been conditioned to be in order to acquire this relationship, right? Those are two totally different people. And so it's like, I've been indoctrinated with this idea of what it means to be a wife and what it means to be holy and this, that, and the other, and now I'm having problems in my relationship with my husband or with my wife because, what I've been taught thus far about myself, even about my body, I can't even, and that's a whole other conversation. Everything about sex and our bodies is pretty much demonized, but the marriage bed is undefiled. And then, purity culture has gotten you to your marriage, and now you're having problems in that undefiled marriage bed because you failed to get the education that you needed just about your natural body and its normal functions. There's just so much in that space. And so when you talk about healing and being able to just be free, for your spirit to be free to worship, for your heart to be free to love, for you to be able to be free and to show up as yourself unfiltered, you need this level of unfiltering. Like when we talk about that, it's hard to do when your whole life you've been told to do or to be, you've been told how to do and be.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, you know, what am I supposed to do now? It's creating all this turbulence in my relationships. What am I supposed to do now? Well, I'm glad you asked. You really have to have a come to Jesus, and you got to know God for yourself. And you got to be okay with telling people no. And you got to be okay with having boundaries with yourself and with other people, and be committed to the relearning of what works for you.
Being committed to the relearning, I think that is it. Because a huge part of this self-awareness journey, a huge part of this growth journey is unbecoming. But then what happens when we have unbecome everything that we have been indoctrinated to become, right? We may feel like we are this empty shell of a person, but who you are is still down on the inside. But it's just exercising that muscle of your authentic self. It's finding those spaces where your authenticity is celebrated and it's affirmed. It is also beginning to be that for someone else, right? Not telling somebody else you're to this or you're to that or you need to do that, but allowing them to express themselves fully. And I think it's important, when I think about, again, this work that I do, to start this at a young age, because like you said, we are taught from kinder blocks high to be people pleasers, right? And I get how that is a part of training, but at what point and how do you really build the character of a little girl to say that your uniqueness is very much connected to your purpose? And that is going to be a part of your self-love. That is going to be a part of your joy. That is going to be the thing that connects you to God. That is going to be the thing that really sets your heart on fire and sets your heart apart from others. It's starting that early. So if this is your first time hearing a message like this, our goal, because when me and Danny heard this, like, and hear anything like this, like, honestly, while we may get angry, at the center of that, our hearts weep, because we know the bondage that it produces, the bondage that we had to untangle with the help of God, with the help of the Holy Spirit, ourselves on our heart, that we still have to pull back on, that we're still pushing back against, so we won't essentially go back to our vomit. And so I hope conversations like this that we have on here and that we continue to have on here either provides that space for you or pricks your heart just a little bit more to give you the courage to either begin to step out or to begin to ask the right questions about who you are and if environments, people, and relationships are safe for you. And so, Danny, I want to say thank you so much for being on the Good Girl Podcast.
Always happy to be here.
As always, if you have any questions, any confessions, any comments, you can always do that on social media, or you can just head to our website, goodgirlpodcast.com, and submit any and all of that. I want to thank you again, Danny, for being a part, and thank you all for listening. This is the Good Girl Podcast.